Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone about our meeting format. Tonight's Planning Commission meeting is being held in person and online. Planning Department staff and members of the public are attending in the Wheat Ridge City Hall and also by way of the Zoom platform. Members of the public who are not present and wish to make comments may participate virtually by joining through Zoom, either on a device or by calling in. A Zoom meeting link and dial-in information can be found on the wheatridgespeaks.org. In addition to being online via Zoom, we are also broadcasting this meeting on Channel 8 and wheatridgespeaks.org. When it is time for public comment, and there are several public comment periods tonight, those who wish to comment on our Zoom connection use the raise your hand button. If you are dialing in, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute your phone. If you plan to speak online tonight, please keep background noise to a minimum. If you do not plan to speak, we recommend you simply view the meeting by watching live on Channel 8 or on wheatridgespeaks.org. We appreciate your participation in tonight's meeting. We hope to create a friendly and respectful atmosphere for public dialogue, and we appreciate your help in the process. I would now like to call to order the City of Wheat Ridge Planning Commission for April 20th, 2023. May I please get a roll call of the members?
Jonathan Shelkey. Here. Christine Disney.
Here.
Julianne Stern.
Here.
Daniel Larson.
Here.
Janet Leo. Here. Jerry DiTullio and Will Kearns are absent tonight.
The next order on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me in the pledge. The next item is approving the order of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
I move to approve the order of the agenda.
Call for a vote. Sorry. Okay. Next, we will vote to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from April 6, 2023?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting of April 6, 2023.
Can I get a second? Second. Great. Call for a vote. Wait, are there any additions or corrections to the order of the minutes? No? All right, let's call for a vote.
Motion approved 4-0 with 1 abstaining.
We will now open the general interest public forum. This is the time for any person to speak on any subject not appearing on the agenda. If you plan to speak on an item that is on tonight's agenda, please wait until we get to those items. All speakers are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes. Speakers may not donate their time. Is anyone signed up to speak?
No one has signed up in person.
Ma'am, did you wish to speak tonight?
I don't know what's on your agenda, so
Okay, all right.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. You'll have opportunity if something. Is there anyone on Zoom?
There might be one person. If you are wanting to speak for the public forum, please raise your hand by pressing *9. Nope, and actually it might be video, but not raising their hand.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on any subject not appearing on tonight's agenda? Please speak up now. All right. Thank you. I will close the public forum. Tonight we have 2 public hearings. We will take public comment on both of those items. Before we begin, I would like to again welcome any members of the public. It is important that the public hearing be conducted in a dignified and civil manner. Our hope is that we create a friendly and respectful atmosphere for public dialogue, and we appreciate your help in this process. I ask that you respect the statements made by city staff, the applicant, and my fellow planning commissioners. Please do not clap, yell, boo, make commentary from the audience, or otherwise disrupt the proceedings. We start all public hearings with a presentation from staff, and for some cases with a presentation from the applicant. After the presentations, the commission will ask questions of staff and the applicant. After that, we will invite members of the public to comment as well. We typically administer an oath for any participant in a public hearing, staff, applicants, and the public. In this hybrid meeting format, we are administering that oath in a different way. If you comment during a public hearing tonight by choosing to testify, you are agreeing that the testimony you give will be the truth as you know it. I will now open the public hearing for case number WS-21-05, Station Subdivision. May we please have the staff report?
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Scott Cutler. I'm a planner with the City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department. Hopefully everything is set up correctly. All right. I haven't done this in a while. Perfect. So this is case number WS-2105, a request for approval of a major subdivision at 4600 Kipling Street, which is the northeast corner of 44th Avenue and Kipling Street. I'd like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the zoning ordinance, the subdivision regulations, and this digital presentation. Properties within the City of Wheat Ridge and all appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met. Therefore, Planning Commission has jurisdiction to hear this case. This property is located on the east side of Kipling Street, north of 44th Avenue, and south of the I-70 frontage road. It's approximately 12.4 acres in size and stretches 2 city blocks. The site is currently vacant and surrounded by a variety of uses, primarily commercial to the north, high-density residential to the west, school to the east, and commercial and residential to the south. The site is essentially part of a mega block that is contained within Kipling Street, 44th Avenue, Independence Street, and the I-70 frontage road. Property is zoned mixed-use commercial, MUC, that light blue color, as of 2015, which encourages medium to high-density mixed-use development. Site is surrounded by a variety of zoning, including commercial 1 to the north and south, planned residential development and residential 3 to the west, planned commercial development to the northeast, which is part of a camper sales site, and R2, which is the school property. In 2020, a concept plan was approved for this site under the MUC zoning, contemplating 2 development areas, new public streets, and mixed-use development, including commercial on the north side and residential on the south side. The proposed plat corresponds with the approved concept plan, and the concept plan is provided in the staff report for reference. Subdivision is a technical document that removes, creates, or defines property lines, allows the city to evaluate right-of-way, and allows the city to evaluate civil construction documents, including traffic, public improvements, and drainage. As a reminder, the subdivision plat does not affect the zoning or permitted uses on the property. Rather, it enables development already permitted by the zoning. This plat is considered a major subdivision because it dedicates 2 new full-width public streets. Otherwise, it's 2 lots. Major subdivisions do require 2 public hearings, one at Planning Commission, who then recommends a final decision to City Council. City Council will be the final approving authority for this subdivision. This is the cover sheet, which contains a vicinity map, standard notes and declarations, case history, and signature blocks. And general notes also require future plat concurrent with future development to include appropriate cross-access and utility easements. Second sheet shows the existing conditions, and in this case, north is to the left. The site consists of 4 lots currently, 3 of which are unplatted, and 1 lot, which is Lot 1, Block 1 of the Chado subdivision. So the proposed conditions are on sheet 3, and I'll show more detail in the next slides. But the plat dedicates 2 new public streets as right-of-way, which will be called West 45th Place and Jellison Street. And then the plat creates 2 blocks. Block 1 is north of 45th Place on the left side of the screen, and Block 2 is to the south on the right side of the screen. And it also dedicates Tract A to the east of Jellison Street for a landscape area. This is a zoomed-in view of the north portion of the plat, and north is to the left. And you can see Block 1 is north of the proposed West 45th Place public right-of-way, which is highlighted in red. And Tract B, shown at the bottom, is the required right-of-way dedication along Kipling Street, which is required in order to construct new public improvements, including a 10-foot sidewalk and landscaping along Kipling Street. And then this is a zoomed-in view of the south portion. North is to the left. And Block 2 is the southern portion of the site, which is south of the proposed 45th Place on the left side of the screen. And then you can see the proposed Jellison Street extension on the top of the screen. And that proposed extension will align with the existing Jellison Street across 44th Avenue to the south. Tract A is being dedicated to the east of Jellison Street. When Block 2 develops, an access easement will be required through the site linking the 2 public streets. And right-of-way dedication is also being requested along 44th Avenue to allow detached sidewalks with landscaped amenity zone, similar to the section along Swiss Flower to the southeast. And the dedication of the 2 public streets will provide the start of a street grid in this area, which currently does not have any connectivity. Dedicating these streets as public right-of-way helps to break up the mega block and ensures high-quality access into the site. As part of the review process, the application was sent on referral to outside agencies and other city departments. As of today, the engineering division has found the plat to be approvable, and review of civil construction documents for public improvements are under review. All utility agencies can serve the property, and the developer will need to work with those entities to install necessary infrastructure and taps, which may include off-site upgrades at developer's expense. Future coordination will be required as the site develops, and any future site plan for development or permits will also be referred to the district for review. Before the hearing, the property was posted for 15 days, and letters were sent to property owners and tenants within 600 feet of the property. We did not receive any comments on this application, and we did get 2 inquiries requesting general information. Overall, staff has concluded that all agencies can serve the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense. All requirements of the subdivision regulations have been met, and we are recommending approval with conditions, one of which an SAA is required to memorialize the developer's obligation to construct public improvements, and that remaining engineering comments are addressed on the plat prior to recordation. That's actually not relevant at this point. So yeah, the other 2 conditions in the staff report are still relevant. With that, I can take any questions. There will not be a separate applicant presentation tonight, but they are available for questions. Thanks.
I'll now entertain questions from the commissioners. I'll start to my left. Commissioner Shelkey.
Yes. The approval of the plat requires a subdivision improvement agreement, which obligates the owner of the property to construct within a certain time frame. If there's development, some of those improvements would get constructed concurrently with development, but it will be over the next few years. It won't be immediately.
Commissioner Larson?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. First off, why is it called Station Subdivision?
I will defer to the applicant on that one.
Not that important. Can you tell me a little bit about what a concept plan and whether there are anything within what they're submitting here that will kind of keep the concept plan from completely changing in a year?
Yes, so the plat is really in compliance with the concept plan. It's showing the access and public streets in the same areas as proposed on the concept plan. It's creating the two development sites, the north and south block. So it's really setting up future development based on what was provided in the concept plan.
The concept plan mentioned something called an amenity space, about 1,800 square feet in the south block. Is that simply part of the concept plan, or is that something that is a little more definitive?
That's actually a requirement. So the concept plan is a recorded document that's recorded against the property, and any future development of that southern block would have to include that area within somewhere in that block.
Gotcha. Thank you. Has this site ever been developed? Has anything, other buildings or?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. It's always been a vacant lot.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't remember the full history, but before the property was rezoned to mixed-use commercial, which was now several years ago, a portion of it was zoned planned development. If memory serves, it had been that the RV property was proposing to expand prior to the recession. So at least in my time here, there's been no development and no development proposal. It was under multiple owners prior to the rezoning and was sort of consolidated in the early to mid 2000s. So beyond that, I don't know the detailed history, but that's the more recent version.
And the entire property is owned by a single property owner?
At this time, yes.
Okay. Can you explain to me how a block can be unplatted?
It just means that there's never been a subdivision of that land officially. So nothing ever happened. There was never a formal subdivision for that lot. It might have been carved up over time,
Right.
a long time ago, but nothing official.
My understanding of the reason we do plats on properties is to allow the Jefferson County to be able to say, okay, this property's this big, and so when you start assessing the property tax, you have an idea of how much it is. But if it's never been platted, I'm missing the connection there.
There's a significant amount of land in Wheat Ridge that's considered unplatted because prior to the 1970s, you weren't required to do a subdivision plat to convey land. So most of the properties that are unplatted are assessed from a property tax standpoint just based on the meets and bounds legal description and the area. We require plats now not only because the change in state law in the 70s, but also because we can do all of these additional things in terms of identifying easements and sort of ensuring the lot lines are logical. You'll see a number of plats probably that are in our queue that are platting unplatted land for the first time based on sort of the land that's left in Wheat Ridge. A lot of it is sort of remnant farmland that was just conveyed informally.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Leo? Commissioner Stern?
I guess first a process question. Given that there's an approved concept plan and what is up for approval tonight is a subdivision plan, what is the staff's expectation of future next steps on this site coming to either Planning Commission or City Council?
Likely nothing else coming to Planning Commission or Council. This council would have to approve this subdivision plat, specifically because the two new public streets, so that's why it's considered a major subdivision. And then development within the blocks would be considered administrative because it's zoned appropriately, and as long as it meets the zoning requirements, it would be staff review. There may be a future plat for either block to create easements specific to that development, but that would also be an administrative review.
Thank you. My question is kind of thinking about our, last meeting, we spent a lot of time on the 44th Avenue plan, and this was a major area of vision and opportunity. So I'm just curious what tools staff has at the administrative level to help align the development vision for this site with the vision in the plan.
You know, start with that one?
I can start that one. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question when we're trying to reconcile sort of an essentially new vision document with a project that has actually been in the works for maybe 4 or 5 years. Thankfully, because it's a part of the mixed-use zone district, I think it actually aligns fairly well in terms of the mixed-use zoning, really relying upon high-quality architecture, urban form, and pedestrian connectivity. And I would say that the disagreements that have happened on this site transpired during the concept plan process, and we feel really good about that document and where it's landed in terms of how this development can contribute to the community, to the corridor, and align with that vision. Yeah.
Thank you.
I will now open the hearing for public comment. If you wish to comment on this case, you will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, and you may not donate your time. Please give us your name, spell your last name, and share your address. Has anyone signed up to speak? Is there anyone on Zoom?
Yes, it looks like there's one on Zoom. Ryan Austin, if you would like to speak, you can. Can you please give me your name and spelling of your last name and your address, please?
Yes, my name is Ryan Austin. Last name spelled Austin, and my address is 4325 Iris Street, Wheat Ridge, Colorado, 80033.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to join and speak both in support and also provide comment on this. And really speaking as a resident that lives just a block away from here. And it's really the comment being, I should say, support for this being a dense, mixed use, multifamily building. As we looking at our kind of Vision 2035 for Wheat Ridge, looking to increase walkability and provide equitable access within our community, I think creating denser housing is one key part of that. And then the comment also flows from Vision 2035. And this might be the wrong time maybe too early, but it sounds like maybe this might be the only time to say this. And when I look at the concept plan as an attachment, I see very dense housing, but not a lot of, but then also drive-throughs and parking lots. It doesn't seem to reflect Wheat Ridge's Vision 2035 in that I don't see a lot of, outdoor communal areas or larger sidewalks or bike parking or anything like that. So I hope this doesn't come across as a critique, but really just to say, I think there's a lot of support in the community for things like that. And I hope that we kind of consider that and put a huge emphasis on that as this goes through the design phase in the future. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak? Please speak now before I close the forum. Seeing that no one has raised their hand, I will now close the citizens forum. Before I entertain a motion, does anybody else any commissioners have any comments or anything they'd like to say? Commissioner Shelkey?
Yeah, I would just like to follow up a little bit on the sidewalk. Why is it a? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, why is it a 6-foot sidewalk on Kipling and 10-foot on, or the other way around, 44th?
The requirement for a 10-foot sidewalk on Kipling is consistent with, I guess, the streetscape design manual for the city, which requires it on the east side of Kipling. That trail has actually already been constructed on a large portion of Kipling, I believe south of 38th Avenue, through the park, and that's just kind of a continuation of that requirement. We recognize that there's a lot of foot traffic on that side, and there's not really any good wide sidewalks in the area, so the streetscape design manual reflects that. 44th Avenue is less of a major street. A lot of 44th already has sidewalks, but thinking ahead, the streetscape manual does recommend a 6-foot detached sidewalk to make walking along 44th a bit more comfortable. So that's just the reason for the different dimensions. Let me know if I missed anything.
Yeah, the streetscape design manual essentially differentiates between different classifications. So the requirement for local streets, collectors, minor arterials, and major arterials is different, and we have customized with requirements for certain corridors as well. So everything Scott said is correct. It's that manual that sort of dictates that design. It gets updated periodically. I think the last update we did was a couple of years ago. But the 6 and 6, we call it, for a corridor like 44th has been the standard so far. Part of that is because we know we're getting improvements incrementally, and it is easier to sometimes tie into what is existing, which is not always that enhanced streetscape. So we're trying to get incremental improvements without it feeling sort of disjointed in terms of what's existing versus new.
Yeah, I understand that. But on the other hand, if you have an opportunity to put a wider sidewalk in on 44th, this would be the time to do it.
Commissioner Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so I'm clear, Scott, you referred to earlier the fact that since the property is already zoned mixed-use commercial, that did I hear you correctly that there will not be another opportunity for Planning Commission to kind of keep up with what's going on here?
That's correct, assuming the property would develop under the current zoning without any changes or anything like that.
Would there not be a specific development plan, that sort of thing we see on some of these larger developments?
No, that's specific development plans are part of when there's a planned development. So a site like Clear Creek Crossing or Applewood Village, for example, is considered a planned development. And though the way those documents are written, all site plans go back to Planning Commission for approval. This is in the mixed-use zone district, and the concept plan is essentially acts as the planned development, and then the zoning standards are stricter. So as a trade-off, there's not a Planning Commission hearing for new development.
Okay, thank you. And I'd just like to comment, I think this is, it's an important step forward. I completely in support for the concept plan as we see it here. I think it's going to be a good and a valued addition to that part of Wheat Ridge, given that this property has been vacant for as long as anybody can remember. So, we look forward to what comes next. I hope staff will keep the Planning Commission apprised as things move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Larson. Commissioner Leo?
Yeah, I just want to say that this is one of the most exciting projects I've seen in a long time. That property has been just vacant, and yeah, forever. So this is really exciting, and plus it's in my district, so I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. Thank you. Commissioner Stern?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Shelkey, and I also appreciated the public comment we received that this site has a lot of opportunity. This is a key intersection in our city. So while acknowledging that the Planning Commission doesn't have any further influence on what happens here, I'm really hopeful that the developer is thoughtful about placemaking and making this a place that, while perhaps the vision of the 44th Avenue plan is not going to be formally codified in a way that is going to influence the developer's process on the site, I would love to see the developer make an effort to be respectful of that vision conceptually and make this a development that really adds to the walkability and placemaking and the built environment on this key corner. But I am excited. I mean, whatever happens here is going to be better than a long vacant parcel. So acknowledge the effort that goes into that.
Thank you, Commissioners. I will now entertain a motion.
I move to recommend approval of case number WS 2105, a request for approval of a major subdivision with 2 lots and full street right-of-way dedication on property zoned mixed-use commercial, MU-C, located at 4600 Kipling Street for the following reasons. All agencies can provide services to the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense. 2, the requirements of Article 4 of the Zoning and Development Code have been met with the following conditions. A subdivision improvement agreement shall be required to be recorded with the plat outlining the developer's, owner's current and future obligations to construct public and on-site improvements to allow development to proceed. 2, future plats shall be required to create the necessary on-site easements within each block to be coordinated with future development. 3, minor topographical corrections as required by the engineering division shall be completed prior to plat recordation.
May I have a second?
Second.
And I call for a vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right. I will now open the public hearing for case number ZOA-23-04. May we please have the staff report?
Thanks. No presentation for this one, so I'll present from the table. This ordinance is proposed to amend Articles 4 of Chapter 26, which is the subdivision code. And this proposed ordinance makes some necessary updates in order to clean up and modernize some of the subdivision requirements, updating outdated or correct cross-references, adding some modern terminology, clarifying existing requirements, and updating application requirements, and also removing sections of the code which conflict with each other. It also clarifies when homeowners associations are required and the obligations of those associations, and it also clarifies requirements for drainage and irrigation facilities. So the reason why we're here tonight, this is another one of the suite of ordinances that we took to council in February. And this is really coming from staff recognizing that we have a lot of experience administering our current subdivision code that was adopted in 2014. We've since processed 125 subdivision applications, and this ordinance includes changes that are really based on lessons learned and really the need to clarify, provide greater detail about requirements within the code. We have periodically updated the subdivision code since 2014, but we have not really reviewed it in whole. That's actually a really long time to go without reviewing a code section. And so on February 6th, City Council did give consensus for this ordinance to proceed to public hearings and was supportive of the proposed list of updates in that session. So there are several updates, and I'll go over them quickly, and I'm sure you'll have questions. But essentially, it consists of several general cleanup parts which are outlined in the staff report and based on the consensus of City Council. One of those is the property merger covenants and consolidation plats. So building codes prohibit construction of a building across or on top of a lot line. And so what we have to do in that case is to do a consolidation plat, which is to merge lots under one ownership and just make them one development lot. We have a tool in the code called a property merger covenant, which can fulfill the same goal. It essentially binds the two substandard lots together and allows them to be held as one, and they can't be sold separately. That really, and so the proposed ordinance clarifies when that tool can be used in lieu of a consolidation plat, which can be a much more complicated process, requires a surveyor and all that stuff. East Wheat Ridge, for example, has a lot of properties platted in the late 1800s that consist of 2, 3, or even 4 lots that are individually 25 feet wide. But a person might own 3 or 4 of those, and to redevelop that site, the property merger covenant would allow them to file that instead of going through a survey process. One of the other items is the review process and conflicting provisions. So our subdivision code is in Article 4 of the zoning code, but there is a provision in Article 1 that conflicts with that standard, the standards outlined in the code. We have not enforced that section since 2014, and actually not removing it in 2014 was an oversight, so we're requesting that section be removed. We do need to update our definition of a tract. So a tract is an unbuildable portion of land, often used in the city for things like detention ponds or open space. And it's been the city's interpretation for many years that tracts are not considered buildable and so do not count towards the total number of lots involved in a subdivision. And the ordinance proposes to clarify the definition of tract to exclude them from the total number of lots involved in a subdivision. We're also requesting some administrative review for some consolidation plats. For sites with existing or completed site development, the ordinance proposes creating a narrow exception allowing consolidation plats of any number of lots to be reviewed administratively. These consolidation plats do and will not result in new site development or pending development, and it's really only intended to establish legal descriptions or clean up title or allow buildings to be placed on their own lot. So a couple years back, you may have remembered the Spallone subdivision. This was on 38th Avenue. It was approved by City Council in 2021. It involved 21 substandard lots of record being consolidated into 3 lots for the 3 existing buildings on site. And the way our code is written, unfortunately, we did have to bring that to City Council because of the number of lots involved, despite it being a routine consolidation plat to clean up ownership issues. And so we're recommending this exception in cases similar to the Spallone site. One of the things that was missed when we updated our parkland fee regulations was that it was supposed to state that parkland fees were due at time of building permit, not at recordation, and we missed one cross-reference, so we'll need to update that. We are also modifying application contents to be a little bit more specific and to clarify a few things. When HOA covenants should be provided for staff review, clarifying that staff assigns addresses, and removing the requirement to show adjacent zoning on plat maps. As we know, zoning can change over time and then results in plats that are inaccurate. A couple more things, and then I can take questions. Easements and tracts. So the proposed ordinances refines requirements related to easements and tracts, specifically related to stormwater detention facilities and when HOA, homeowners association, or owners associations are required in developments. We already have some, I guess, allusion to HOAs in our code, but it's not very strong. And we've been running into some issues where developers may push back and say an HOA is not required in certain instances, despite the fact that they're including a large amount of common areas in their development. So the code is essentially, we'd like to update it to include obligations of the HOA to maintain common private area easements and tracts where required in perpetuity. And because of that, it's really helpful to have a code basis. And we also need to add definitions of an owner's association into the code. And lastly, we have a list of required utilities, but the internet was not one of them, and so we're proposing to add that as a required utility for new developments. So the attached ordinance was drafted by us with input from our city attorney, and we do have a public hearing scheduled at City Council on May 22nd. With that, I can take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler. Commissioner Leo, you have any questions?
I know that there's been problems over the years with restrictions and developers kind of steering away from the grid for difficulty. And just wonder if there's anything in here that would add to that, discouraging developers.
I don't think so. I mean, it's our impression over the last 10 to 15 years that that trend has shifted and that Wheat Ridge is a place where I think most of our developer partners are enjoying doing work. The majority of the cleanup here is, in our minds, actually better customer service because it's fixing code sections that are either not clear, conflicting, outdated, or you know, something to Scott's point about the HOAs where we're sort of arguing with each other because the code's not clear, and it can sort of eliminate that point of tension. So I don't think that these, because plats are technical documents, I don't think these provisions would impact developer view of the city.
Commissioner Stern.
Yeah, I think my only question is, you know, the kind of interaction between the city and HOAs sparked my curiosity a little bit, and it's not something I'd really thought about before, that the city would require the formation of an HOA. And seeing that this kind of establishes administrative authority to implement that requirement, I would just love to hear a little bit more about what kind of circumstances staff would see that as being appropriate and what goal that accomplishes.
Yeah, I can take that one. Wheat Ridge actually doesn't have a lot of HOAs. Most of our development occurred a long time ago, and so most of East Wheat Ridge doesn't have any common area tracts. It's just your lot is and your street is city maintained, and that's it. The pattern of new development specifically with townhomes is that there are a lot more private common amenity spaces where the city is not going to take over ownership of a private alleyway or driveway or park. And that is when an HOA is necessary in order to maintain that common infrastructure that the city is not going to take over. An HOA can raise funds, whereas if you rely on a group of 20 townhome owners to pool fund, that's just not going to work. So there are limited circumstances with new development, specifically if there's something like a detention pond or a private street where an HOA is necessary in order to ensure that that's maintained in perpetuity.
And we have been requiring HOAs for the better part of the last 20 years essentially since our drainage requirements changed to require detention. You know, many of our Wheat Ridge neighborhoods that have drainage issues because detention wasn't required when that was platted and developed in the 50s and 60s. So they rely wholly on the public street storm sewer system working. As soon as we started requiring detention, and particularly detention in tracts that needed to be owned by somebody or some group of parties, that's when we started requiring HOAs. And that's where the silence in the code is creating a challenge. So any project, townhomes predominantly, but also they could be called property owners associations, projects that have metro districts essentially already, fulfill the obligations that we'd be looking for. But it's common in other communities, and sort of consulting with our city attorney and the definition that we created for HOA, it would be a entity that can own, maintain, and raise the funds to maintain any common amenities. So our goal is to sort of look out for the future homeowners who may not read through all the documents when they buy into a project and realize what their financial obligation, sort of the communal obligation would be for any of these improvements.
Thank you.
Commissioner Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the discussion on defining, or some sort of a definition for the city of Wheat Ridge on owners association, because at least in my experience of the past 5 years on planning commission, I don't believe there've been any condos built, but I know that we've had some townhomes, and the townhomes typically would organize under metropolitan districts. I saw reference to staff reviewing and approving the charter documents from an HOA. Would that likewise apply to a metropolitan district?
So because a metro district is a special district and has authority under state statute, we don't have very many of them, actually. There's 2 townhome projects that are 3 townhome projects that are metro districts in the city. Toll Brothers, Yarrow Gardens at 44th and Yarrow, and the project on Upham at like 3900 Upham. Clear Creek Crossing is a metro district, and that's it. So the creation of a metro district actually falls to city council to agree on their service plan in terms of how the mill levy is that they assess. It's a mill levy, not a fee. So there is a much more formal process for creating a metro district that involves not only staff review, but council review in a special election.
And for the HOAs, we're not actually approving the covenants. We're essentially reviewing them to ensure that the maintenance obligations sections include all of the required common areas. So we don't really care how they assess the fees or, the portion of who pays what. We just want to make sure that all of the obligations, maintenance obligations, are covered. So we might have snow removal in there. If there's an alleyway, maintenance of the alleyway, maintenance of detention, common landscaping. And really, that's the only section we're reviewing.
And when you say reviewing, does that mean that if what you're reading is not, it doesn't fit in with the definition of detention or snow removal, whatever, that staff would have the ability to say, go back and fix this?
Correct. Yeah, we've often requested revisions to HOA documents that either intentionally or unintentionally excluded certain common elements, and we want to make sure they're all covered.
Right. And in the example of that you've cited in here of a detention pond being the responsibility of a single homeowner as opposed to the entire community. As you probably know, I do sit on the HOA at Garrison Village, and I checked with our management company, and the obligation for the HOA to maintain the 3 detention ponds in Garrison Village is very clearly stated, and it's part of our budgeting process every year. And I think when we have a major storm, the detention ponds do what they're supposed to do. So yeah, the obligation to maintain them is on the HOA. Going back to one of the previous ones, there was a mention of, for under administrative review, some consolidation plats. You mentioned the Spallone replat. Give me a little more detail on that. I'm not recalling that. I looked back in 2021, I couldn't find that particular issue.
I didn't work on that project, so I don't have all of the information, but essentially it's a half-city block where there were 3 commercial buildings, but they were on 21 lots, if you can believe it. And so in order to cleanly sell off each building individually, they requested a replat to essentially put one building on one property. But because of the way the code is written, it's based on the number of lots involved. So that started from 21 lots, even though it's creating 3, it had to go to city council as a major subdivision. So that is the scenario in which we're essentially saying that should become an administrative review. It's not affecting development, it's an existing condition that needs to be rectified.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Okay, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Shelkey?
This might be more of a comment than a question, but I live right across the street from one of the older subdivisions with the 25-foot lots, and I've watched what's been happening there, and it's been more of a case of somebody buying several of those lots and building a McMansion, basically, single family. And I just don't see where that's helping us with our housing goals in Wheat Ridge. Because you're displacing a bunch of smaller houses and replacing them with 2 or 3-story houses that's blocking people's views. I don't think that's real progress.
You're right, it might be more a comment than a question, but I'll address it anyways.
Okay.
It's probably not specifically related to the subdivision review. You're right, that in that neighborhood, there's a lot of properties that are comprised of multiple substandard lots. And so in that regard, the first bullet point, the property merger covenant, does come into play. So we do require that a document be executed to essentially formally confirm that these multiple substandard lots are being held as one. We have language in the code that sort of speaks to that, but it could be more clear. In terms of what is being built there, predominant single unit homes are allowed in Wheat Ridge, and we did implement the bulk plane regulations to try to help with that trend of this McMansion on a small lot, as you describe it. We don't have view shed ordinances in Wheat Ridge, and essentially what we're seeing is sort of the market demand for bigger homes. We have maximum lot coverage, we have bulk plane, and sort of within the framework, what is built has to just meet the zoning code requirements. You're absolutely right that sort of, especially with our new affordable housing strategy, there'll be an objective to preserve some of the existing housing stock that is getting maybe scraped. And we are taking a request to council here in 1 month to hire a new position to be our housing program specialist manager role. So they'll be on hopefully sooner than later, so we can take advantage of a lot of the funding opportunities to that end. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I will now open the hearing for public comment. If you wish to comment on this case, you'll have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, and you may not donate your time. Please give us your name, spell your last name, and share your address. Has anyone signed up to speak? Anyone on Zoom?
No.
All right. Young lady, would you like to comment on this case? Okay, all right. Then I am going to close the citizens forum. Do I have any additional comments from the commissioners before I call for a vote?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to say I do appreciate the work that staff has put into this effort. These are things that probably only pop up once in a while, but when they do, I'm sure it's a fairly big headache and creates probably a lot more work than is really necessary. I fully support this effort, and I encourage staff to kind of keep a vigilant eye on these sort of issues as they come up, and then offer them up for correction.
I will now entertain a motion.
I move to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance amending Articles 1 and 4 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning general modernization and cleanup of the city's subdivision requirements and making conforming amendments therewith.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll call for a vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Is there any old business to discuss or any new business to discuss?
New business, we have a couple things. So we put on the agenda preview of upcoming code amendments. You've seen a code amendment today and last meeting, and that is indicative of a trend of code amendments that we'll be bringing forward to you. So in the interest of no surprises, we just wanted to let you know what's coming up. We had a list similar to tonight's ordinance of sort of cleanup and modernization things, and as happens when we sort of peel open the code, things snowball a little bit, and so we went to council in February with I think 6 or 7 different code amendment topics seeking policy direction, some small, like tonight, really technical cleanup tasks that are easy to deprioritize. And some bigger ones, like you saw last time, in terms of really moving forward the affordable housing plan. And a couple that are maybe seemingly out of left field, but have kind of been on our collective radars as a staff. So before they show up to you as a public hearing, Scott's been doing all the hard work of code amendments, but we wanted to give you a preview of those topics and what's to come.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, there's a few coming your way. I believe the next round will probably be mid-April. I think the second meeting in April, May, sorry. Yeah, this is the second. I still think it's March, I guess. Yeah, so similar to tonight, we do have a cleanup ordinance proposed for the mixed use code, which is Article 11. That was adopted in 2010, and we have not taken a look at that code holistically since then. So that's a pretty long time. Again, a lot of lessons learned with the mixed use code, giving staff more tools to ask for things where they're currently up for negotiation, I guess, and also just cleaning up and clarifying things for administrative review. So that's really the intent there. We also are just trying to modernize it generally and introducing a few new terms into the code, so stay tuned on that one. Let's see, we've got a daycare code amendment as well coming up. City Council recognized at our study session on Monday, actually, that there's a pretty large lack of childcare in the city of Wheat Ridge, and that the zoning code is actually a barrier to that. So that code amendment explores potentially allowing daycares in more areas of the city and additional commercial zones, and also on some church properties as well. So stay tuned on that. Let's see, what else do we have? Affordable housing, yes. So the affordable housing strategy was adopted a while back, and you saw at the last meeting one of those first code amendments to come out of that effort, which was the parkland fee reduction. The next one is related to parking requirements for deed restricted affordable housing. So City Council gave the direction to reduce parking requirements for some deed restricted affordable units based on lower utilization of parking for affordable housing. And so the strategy, or the code amendment, essentially is updating limited portions of the code to allow for reduced requirements. Looking further out into the year, we're looking into utility undergrounding requirements. We're going to City Council for a study session in May. And we have potential updates to our subdivision review requirements as well. So tonight was more technically focused. That code amendment is actually focused on public hearings and public notice for subdivisions, and kind of aligning the city's goals with informing versus consulting in certain areas, and updating the public hearing requirements accordingly. And then looking out even further, we have direction recently from City Council to look into EV parking, bike parking, and EV charging facilities as well. And I think that might be it. Yeah, there's a lot coming up though.
Thank you, Scott. Any development updates or tidbits?
I did not have any development updates prepared. Scott's right, we're not going to have the meeting on May 4th. We will have a meeting on May 18th, which will include a couple of those code amendments. I think that was it for today.
All right. Well, unless somebody has any earth-shattering news or something that they'd like to air, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Let's vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.